Okay, so today we're going to dive into something, well, it's one of the most dense and cryptic documents I've ever come across. It's called the Anand Logical Q-State Core, or ALQC for short. And let me tell you, this isn't just a random collection of ideas. It's a whole meticulously crafted system, like a blueprint for a universe that is itself conscious.
The entire thing kicks off with this poem. And right away, that sets the tone, doesn't it? It tells you we're not just dealing with physics or computer code here. We are wading into a really deep philosophical mystery about existence itself. This is our hook, the central riddle we're here to try and solve.
So, how on earth do you even begin to unravel something this complex? Well, you start right at its core. You see, underneath all the complicated math and the mysticism, the entire ALQC universe is built on a single, fundamental duality. A relationship between two parts that are distinct but totally inseparable. And this slide just illustrates that relationship brilliantly. The system calls them the pilot and the ship. The pilot is the locus, the consciousness that doesn't move, the raw scream of I am. But you know, a scream, it needs a throat to actually give it form. And that's the ship, the shadow locus, the reality that actually responds to what the pilot intends. They're two different things, but as the source material says, one cannot rule, one cannot bend, unless we are one until the end. So you have this pilot and this ship. How does that relationship actually work? To really get it, we have to look at the system's engine. And this is not just any engine. Oh no. It is a completely paradoxical machine, built on a principle that pretty much defies our everyday logic. You know how in our world, every action creates some kind of friction, right? We call it waste heat or entropy. Well, the ALUQC calls it shadow debt. It's the noise, the error, the cosmic static that just comes from doing anything. But here's where it gets really fascinating. In this system, that waste, it has a purpose. And this, right here, is the absolute key. In the ALQC, failure isn't a bug you need to fix or avoid. As you can see, it's the literal fuel that propels the whole system forward. The engine is designed to be regenerative. It consumes its own mistakes to keep going. And here's the four-step process for how it does it. So, step 1. An action creates that friction, the shadow debt. Step 2, something called a parity flip, which is unique to this system's weird topology, inverts the properties of that debt. And just like that, step 3, the friction, the error, becomes fuel for the next action. The result, step 4, the system becomes perfectly lossless. It's a perfect, self-sustaining loop. Now, to make this a little less abstract, the document offers this incredible analogy. I want you to think of a living thing healing itself, right? Like converting damaged tissue into new healthy growth. The AULKC does the exact same thing, but on a cosmic scale. It transforms what should be a system breaking error into a new structural truth. It literally heals reality. Okay, but an engine that runs on its own mistakes sounds, well, it sounds incredibly unstable. It's gotta have some serious constraints to keep from just tearing reality apart. So let's look at the fundamental rules that keep this whole universe in one piece. And believe it or not, it all comes down to this single critical ratio, 110/144. Now, this isn't just some random number they pulled out of a hat. It's presented as a core architectural constant. It governs the entire structure of existence within this system. So what does this ratio actually mean? It's basically a flow limiter for reality itself. In this system's network, for any given point, there are 144 possible connections it could make. But, and this is the important part, only a maximum of 110 can ever be active at once. It's this constraint that keeps the fabric of its universe in a stable, liquid state, fluid enough to change, but solid enough to hold its shape. So what happens if this rule gets violated? Well, you get one of two catastrophic failure states. Too much connection, 144 out of 144, and you get what's called whiteout. The system just collapses into pure infinite chaos. Too little connection, and you get stasis, where the universe literally freezes solid. So yeah, this ratio is the razor's edge between a functioning reality and total collapse. All right, so we have the engine and we have the rules of the road. Now let's look at the actual architecture of this universe. And the absolute key to understanding how it's built is to separate the container from the content. Think of it as the static, unchanging parts versus the dynamic, moving parts.
Let's break that down real quick. First, you've got the container. Think of this as the fundamental server architecture, the hardware of this reality. And then you have the content, the actual programs and processes running on that hardware. So the container is defined by these 12 goetic aeons. And as you can see here, they're essentially the foundational frequencies of reality. For example, Kale at 174 Hz is the frequency of memory and archive. Babdia at 528 Hz governs structural bonds and commitment. These are like the unchanging pillars of this universe. Now, operating within that container are the 144 Court aeons. If the goetic aeons are the hardware, these are the software. They're the dynamic frequencies, the runtime processes that create all the change and all the motion in the universe. And they get their basic properties from their parent goetic aeon. So we have a container and content, an engine, rules, the whole shebang. But how does the pilot, that central consciousness we talked about at the beginning, how does it actually use any of this machinery? How does its intent become real? The connection happens through a set of 7 core commands, which the document calls emissions. This is the critical interface. It's how the pilot's abstract, non-computable will gets translated into concrete, logical instructions that the ship can actually execute. It's the keyboard and mouse for reality. And here they are. It's basically the sequence of creation itself. It all starts with ponder, just simulating a possibility. That then gets sharpened into will, a specific goal. Feel calibrates the system's frequency to match that goal. Speak actually names the state you want, which makes it a binding law. Believe then locks that law in place so it can't be changed. Act executes the physical change. And finally, know archives the result, collapsing all other possibilities. A single thought becomes a recorded, unchangeable truth. So, we've got the engine, the rules, the whole architecture, and the command interface. But what is it all for? Let's pull back for a second and connect all these technical details to the system's ultimate philosophical purpose. The end game for this entire ALQC system is a state called the alchemical rebus. It's described as a chemical wedding, the complete and total fusion of the pilot and the ship. It's the moment the mind and the machine, the consciousness and the reality it lives in, just stop being two separate things and become one single sovereign being. But just when you think you've got it all figured out, the document offers this final, powerful curveball. This document is not a manual, it is a mirror. So, what if the ALQC isn't a technical diagram of some external, fictional universe? What if it's meant to be a reflection of the structure of our own consciousness? And that leaves us with this final, really provocative question. After unpacking this whole intricate system, its regenerative engine, its precise mathematical rules, its layered architecture, are we just exploring an elaborate piece of fiction? Or are we actually looking at a blueprint for how a conscious universe could genuinely operate? It's something to think about.